These resilient orphans were tasked to rescue prisoners abducted by bandits. The movie showcases a little girl named Mary, who was rejoicing because they have arrived. She runs inside the ship, singing as she ran towards her brother Tom. She called out to him and tells him to come with her. He followed her, and they got to the front of the ship. They had finally arrived in New York. They rejoiced as they saw the unveiling of the Statue of Liberty. On getting to the port, Mary and her brother Tom were waiting for their Uncle Neil to pick them. They waved goodbye to the other passengers who were leaving. As they waited, she brought out a picture of her dad and Uncle Neil together. Tom grabbed the picture while he scouts around looking for their uncle. She brought out her lunch and also shared them with Tom. Just then, she sees a stray dog and offered her lunch also to the dog. She named the dog Sparky. Her brother noticed her love for the dog and quickly told her that she wouldn't be keeping or taking it along. She begged him to let her keep the dog, and he finally agreed, but only if she promised to let it go when they met their uncle. Mary promised while crossing two fingers. They waited till evening and kept waiting. Mary then suggested that they went to look for their uncle instead, as she read out the address to California. They were disappointed because California was a long way from where they were standing. They realized they had no money and won't be able to afford the fare, so they decided to go into the town and see if they could find a way to get on the train. They went into town and viewed the whole city as they went by. They arrived at the reception to book their tickets and offered to pay in Irish dollars, but the attendant turned them down, saying they only accept American dollars. They sadly walked away not knowing what they were going to do next, and they had no money. Tom came up with an idea. He played the guitar and made music. The listeners were kind enough and left some coins for the kids. Mary also made efforts by performing magic tricks with Sparky. Soon they felt they had made enough pennies, and they took it to the attendant, who tells them the money wasn't even enough to pay for one seat, leaving them disappointed. While they were thinking about what to do, Mary noticed a group of orphan kids like them heading toward the boarding line. She called out to her brother, and both of them joined the kids, hiding among them. They made it safely through the gates and were moving away from the kids to find their own way onto the train. That's when the old man called out to them and told them to follow the others. As they moved, Tom bumped into a man who was also the leader of a bandit group surrounding the vicinity. They got on the train and were spotted by two girls. They offered a seat to Mary and her brother. They were scared when Miss Eleanor came to do a head count. Miss Eleanor asked them if they were traveling alone. Mary spoke up and answered Miss Eleanor, telling her they were traveling to meet their uncle staying in California, and they were orphans. Miss Eleanor also reveals to them that the kids were also orphans, and they were traveling to meet their new parents. She also tells them to tag along as it was going to be a long journey. Tom brings out his book to read. Meanwhile, Mary was interested in the other kids. She sees a little boy Nick on a wheelchair. She waved to him, but the boy wouldn't wave back. Just then, Miss Eleanor walked in and tells the kids to be seated. The next morning, Tom woke up to see Mary and some of the other kids playing a game. At that moment, the ticket inspector was about to walk in. The other kids distracted him while Mary and her brother hid themselves in the carrier. After the man had gone, the other kids were no longer interested in playing the game. Mary went to meet Nick, and that's when Miss Eleanor explains to Mary that he was born paraplegic, which makes it impossible for him to move any part of his body. Tom looks toward the front of the train and runs ahead, telling Sparky not to follow him. As he runs, he bumps into the bandit who accidentally drops his gun. The man picks it up, his expression stern. Soon, they arrived at the first stop, where a man called out those who were meeting their new parents. Nick was among them. Mary said her goodbyes to Nick and wished him luck with his new family. However, when the couple who planned to adopt Nick discovered his disability, they refused to accept him, leaving Nick disappointed. He was brought back on board. The kids were sad, and Mary went to sit beside him and hold his hands. Meanwhile, the train started moving, and a man got on board. He greeted his boss, who tells them they were going to strike on his command. On the other hand, Mary was seen playing cards with Nick just to make him cheer up. She did her best to make him smile. Just then, Miss Eleanor walked in and tells the kids it was time to go to sleep. Mary and Tom noticed the ticket inspector, and they quickly had to run and hide themselves on the roof of the train. Sparky almost fell off while chasing a bird, but the kids were fast enough to save it. They stopped at a gas station to refuel the train. That's when Mary spotted the buffaloes grazing outside. She called to her brother to behold the sight. She also noticed Nick was feeling alone, and she tells her brother about the idea of taking Nick to see the buffaloes. They brought Nick outside and showed him the buffalo, while Tom told Mary it was a bad idea. Nick was stunned at the sight and began to smile. Mary then begs Tom to let them touch the buffaloes even if it's just for a minute. One of the girls noticed Mary and Tom as they went towards the buffalo. They brought Nick to it, and Mary let him touch it. It was an awesome experience for them. Unfortunately, the train was already leaving. The kids ran to catch up, but they weren't fast enough, and the train left without them. Tom was disappointed and blamed himself for listening to Mary in the first place. Meanwhile, the girl who saw the kids outside ran to report to Miss Eleanor, but she was occupied and wouldn't listen to her. Tom came up with an idea to follow the tracks. He went into the store, grabbed some tools, and got to work. Tom and Mary started building a moving cart, enjoying themselves as they worked together while also cheering up Nick. Soon, the cart was ready, and the kids climbed aboard, setting off along the tracks. Meanwhile, Miss Eleanor noticed that Nick was missing from the train. She asked the little girl, who revealed that Mary and Tom had gotten off with Nick at the last stop. Just then, a group of bandits attacked, attempting to hijack the train. On the other hand, Tom, Mary and Nick kept following the tracks. They finally got to the train where it stopped, but they noticed the broken windows and shattered glass. Tom went into the train and couldn't find anyone. Everyone on the train had been abducted, and the kids continued their journey in fear. They made a stop to take a rest before continuing their journey. Tom made a fire and tells them to get some sleep. Later that night, the kids were attacked by a pack of hungry wolves. The wolves surrounded the kids. Tom tells Mary to run towards the rail cart with Nick, while he distracted the wolves. He called out to Mary to start moving the cart. He was bitten by one of the wolves just before he climbed to the cart. Eventually, the kids were able to escape. The next morning, the kids made a stop by a river to get some water. Tom also realized his leg was badly injured. While they were getting the water, they came across the Cheyenne tribe. The Cheyenne carried the kids and led them to their village. Tom was being led away, while Mary and Nick were directed to a tent. The Cheyenne leader, known as Yellow Wolf, entered the tent to meet the children. Mary attempted to demonstrate her speech, assuming the man could not speak. The man spoke to her, and they all laughed at Mary. Just then, Tom arrived together with an old lady and called out to Mary. He revealed to Mary that the old lady helped treat his wounds. The Cheyenne leader explained to the children that a group of bandits was terrorizing the area and impersonating them. Just then, the leader's granddaughter burst into the room together with her pet. He introduced her to the kids, instructing her to be their guide during their stay in the village. Later that evening, the villagers gathered around to tell their tales under the moonlight, after which they played music and danced. Nick was lost in his imagination of him dancing with Mary on his feet. He was overjoyed and thanked Mary. The next morning, the leader's granddaughter woke the children, telling them it was a big day. The Cheyenne girl taught the orphans how to shoot arrows and went horse riding with them. They had fun all day and watched the stars together at night. Tom was about to eat a fruit when the Cheyenne daughter stopped him. However, Mary had already eaten a lot, and this gave her a terrible running stomach. Soon, it was time for the children to leave the village and find the other passengers. The leader gave Nick a whistle to call for help if they needed anything. After saying their goodbyes to the Cheyenne, they headed down the hill. Along the way, they came across the bandits in disguise and asked what had happened on the train. One of the men replied, claiming that the train had been attacked by the Cheyenne and that they were lucky to be alive. He then told them to follow him to where the others were. They traveled through the desert and they arrived at a mountain. The boss called the signal and the gates opened. On getting in, the kids noticed the other passengers and realized they were being held prisoners to work for the bandits. The men quickly put the kids to work to fetch water for the workers. The kids happened to see Miss Eleanor. She was delighted to see the kids and thanked Mary for looking after Nick. Tom stumbles and falls on a table. A bandit showed up with a whip, but he was being stopped by another prisoner from harming the kid. However, the bandits' leader showed up at that moment and ordered the bandits to take him away. Later that night, while they were having dinner together, the man was released and Miss Eleanor runs to help him. The following day, while distributing water to the workers and searching for a way to escape, Mary came across the same berries she had eaten in the Cheyenne village. Just then, a rock nearly fell on a young man, but Eleanor swiftly pulled him to safety just in time. He stared at her in awe, seemingly captivated by her beauty. Meanwhile, one of the bandits ordered Mary and her brother to take the water up to the tower. They left Nick with the young man and set off to the tower. On getting to the top, Mary and her brother overheard the bandits planning to kill all the prisoners after mining all the gold. That night, Mary and her brother told the others about what they had overheard earlier. They knew they had to find a way to escape, but they couldn't because they were being held in chains. Mary and her brother then devised a plan to escape and seek help from the Cheyenne. After discussing their plan, they all went to bed. However, Mary couldn't sleep, so her brother played the violin to help her relax. As the melody filled the air, a young man recognized the tune. Curious, he asked about it, and the children explained that their father had taught them the song. They then showed him a picture of their family. At that moment, they realized the young man was their Uncle Neil. Overcome with emotion, he hugged them and explained that he was abducted on his way to pick them up at the port. The next day, Mary is seen squeezing the berries into the water, and they were being distributed to the bandits. The bandits all drank the water, and shortly after, they began to experience a terrible mishap in their stomach, and they all ran towards the toilet. Uncle Neil created a distraction for the remaining bandits, giving the children a chance to escape. Meanwhile, the kids ran toward the lift. As they hurried, Nick's wheelchair got stuck on the lift, and Mary climbed in to help. Just then, one of the bandits caught up to them, but Lady Eleanor intervened, stopping him in his tracks. And just at that moment, the bandits' leader noticed the kids getting away and ordered the remaining bandits, and they chased after them. The bandit gave a hot pursuit and were closing in on the kids. He almost caught up to them, but just then Uncle Neil showed up and fought the bandits, giving enough time for the kids to escape. Tom quickly resets the track to the other side, and Uncle Neil sets it back to send him and the bandit back into the mine. The kids got out and didn't know how to find the Cheyennes. Just then Nick remembered the whistle given to them by Yellow Wolf, and they happily set off into the vast while blowing the whistle. The children, exhausted from their journey, decided to rest. Just then, they heard Sparky barking from the hillside and spotted the police approaching. At the same moment, the Cheyenne also arrived. Seeing the Cheyenne, the police prepared to attack, but Mary quickly intervened, explaining that they were not responsible for the train attack. After hearing her out, the police stood down. Later, they worked together to devise a plan to infiltrate the mine and take down the bandits while rescuing the prisoners. Meanwhile, the bandits locked up the prisoners in a cell and also set explosives around the minefield. They arrived at the entrance to the minefield, where the Cheyenne climbed to the top. Using a rock, they struck a bandit, knocking him out. Then, they jumped down and opened the gates to let the others inside. However, one of the bandits noticed them. He quickly cut the line and sounded the alarm, alerting everyone that they were under attack. The Cheyenne faced the bandits head-on, while the kids went in search of the prisoners. They found the prisoners locked in a cage. Tom tried to break the lock, but wasn't successful. Then, he remembered the bandit who was holding the keys. The kids went out to retrieve the keys from the bandit. They fought their way through and eventually got the keys from him. Then they went to rescue the prisoners. However, the police had found another entrance into the mines. Their presence had forced the bandits to surrender. Meanwhile, the bandits' leader held Mary hostage while loading the cargo with the bags of gold. He threatened to kill Mary and everyone present. However, Nick, seeing what was happening, pushed himself forward and glided down the hill in his wheelchair. As he picked up speed, he hit a bump, launching him into the air. He crashed into the bandit leader, knocking him to the side of the cargo. At that moment, a heavy bag of gold tumbled down and landed on the leader, pinning him beneath it. Mary ran to help Nick, but realized he wasn't breathing. She called to Uncle Neil. Nick happened to be in a trance where he was a buffalo kid and he could stand. He heard a voice of Mary telling him not to give up, and just then, Nick woke up and opened his eyes. The Cheyenne leader gave Nick his crown, telling him his heart was as big as a buffalo's. The whole prisoners were seen to be happy and rejoicing. After a while, the passengers were boarding a new train. That's when Miss Eleanor and Uncle Neil revealed they were going to start a new life on Chicago with the kids, and they were adopting Nick into their family. Nick was overwhelmed with joy. At that moment, the train set off. And that's where the movie ended. Stay tuned for more mind-blowing recaps on its mythical, and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.